Today I'm out here rubbing some new finish on the bus. Not expecting any miracle, just trying to put a layer, a coating protector layer on it. Just something to help it so it doesn't oxidize more, especially at Burning Man. I'm not expecting a miracle or anything, so you just rub it on and wipe it off, and it feels nice when it comes off. The top's not really the problem. It's the bottoms that really got that stuff in Michigan really took a toll on them. So I don't feel like buffing all that out now. But I don't know if they still make this stuff. I've had it sit in the garage for probably 10 years. But it does a pretty good job. It gets rid of a lot of the water spots and stuff too. But just something to put a little layer of protection on there. Just trying to help it out. The bus seems really large when you start doing this kind of a project on it. So I gotta go wipe this off before it dries or gets baked on by the sun. A couple people asked about tire pressures. I made mention that that's why we went and got the bus weighed, so I know what my rear axle is here. So I've got 16,780 pounds on the rear, and I can divide that by 4 tires. And then I contacted the tire manufacturer, and they'll have a chart. Most of them, the chart's online. I couldn't find it for this brand. I had to call them, and they gave me the information over the phone. Basically, they rate the tires at different weights, and for duals or for singles, it's different. And the amount of tire pressure you should have for the amount of weight that it carries. So their chart, the smallest that it goes down to is 4,700 pounds. And at 4,700 pounds per tire, so I'm under that. I'm only like 4,000, just barely 4,000. So I'm in no concern of going over that. I'm not going to add that much weight to the rear. But just to give you an idea, that recommended tire pressure is 80 psi, 80 psi. The tire itself, the recommended psi for it is 135, is what's stamped on the side. That's the max load on them, which is 7,000 for a dual, 7,160 pounds per tire. So that'd be 28,000 pounds. So more than my entire bus weighs just on the rear axle. So I'm well under that. So 80 psi is the recommended tire pressure for that. So that's a good number to use. Why do you use that? You'll get better fuel economy. It'll be a little better ride. I don't need to be driving on rock hard tires like that if they're not carrying the weight. But you can't just guess at what that is. You need to go by their chart. They've tested it. They know what it can handle, the sidewalls and all that. So you could even go 85 if you want to be a little bit more. The next weight on their chart was 5,100 pounds, and that was 90 psi. So anywhere between there. So even if I had 20,000 pounds on my rear axle instead of 16, that would be 90 psi. So there's no reason to run 115 or 135 psi in the tire. So you go by the recommended pressure, and that's how you get that from the manufacturer, the chart for that tire. So that's why I had to get it weighed, so I knew how much weight was on there, so I could accurately set the tire pressures. Very important. Put some tire shine on Lenny today. That's crazy. I never used that kind before. It's an Armor All brand, like Extreme Shine or something like that. This is the new ones. I should have washed them first. Still got some of that lube on them. Doing my pre-trip right now. Going through, I'm going to set all my slack adjusters for the brakes. Checking all the fluids. Greasing it up. Man, that is some shiny tire. The bus is waxed. Still looks dirty though because of the pitting and stuff. This side's not nearly as bad as the other side. I wonder if the sun had something to do with it too. So, time to crawl underneath. That's the tire shine I used. I'll throw an Amazon link to it on there. but I mean the tire is as shiny as the bottle is. I put it on about 4 hours ago. I just walked out here and that's what it looked like. I'm surprised. So a silver side slack adjuster is a little different. The front one here. Most slack adjusters have a little collar that you have to push down on it. The silver sides is just that you actually use a wrench and not a ratchet. You can see I got plenty of meat on the brake shoes there. So you turn it as far as it'll go tight. So I got about a half a turn on it, and then if you just back it off a quarter turn, it's adjusted. I'm going to get under here with my hose in a minute, and this is all that sandy stuff from Michigan is still on here. So I'm going to try and clean this all up just to get that crap off there, because it's definitely salty. You see that kind of rusty color coming through. And then I'll grease everything up. I'll show you the grease chart on this. You'll be like, if you don't have a bus, you'll be like, oh my God, that's crazy. There is a lot of grease fittings on this bus. Oh, that's all right tight. I'm gonna go one more click because 2 clicks wasn't quite a quarter. Plenty of meat on the shoe. Same thing, I'm gonna get all that sand. Try and get that all off there. I don't want that getting it into the grease or anything, and then the new grease should clean it out a little bit. This is my air horn, and it's probably 2 feet long. It's huge. I'm using scale. One of the things for the pre-trip for me is checking for leaks, and I see a little puddle under the engine there where it looks wet, and it looks like the drain plug's wet on the bottom, so go check that out real good. Got the wheel chalked because I had to release the parking brake in the back in order to do the rears, because you can't have the brake engaged to set the brake chambers. So there's the slack adjuster. And there's the brake shoes. More than ½ inch, maybe not quite 3/4 of an inch of shoe left on there. This is hard to get to. I may not get a video of this one. Gotta set the phone down. So the oil pan's real dry all around it everywhere. Just right, a little shiny right there. But I think that's leaking there. And or the drain plug over there and it's blowing back. That's probably my guess. So I got my 15/16 here. But it definitely put a little spot there. That's a little bigger than a Coke can. My bus actually is not running right now. It's turned off. And I got about 72 pounds of air in there. And I always want to check my brakes. So when I step on the pedal, I'll lose air pressure as it fills the brake chambers, but then it should instantly stop losing air and hold that air without losing any. So I'll step on the brake pedal and hold it down. And you can't lose more than, I don't remember what DOT is. I want to say 2 psi a minute. You can see I'm not losing any air at all. That's just a safety check to make sure that the diaphragm's not leaking or a brake hose or something like that. Overall, I don't lose any air on this bus. I started this bus up earlier I put 80 psi in it, and that was just enough to do the parking brake, release the parking brake, and then reset the parking brake. And that was, it's probably been 3 hours ago, and it's still holding that same air pressure. So this does real well with that. Okay, here is my lubrication chart. Most of these are grease fittings. I told you there's a lot of them. Every one of those numbers. A couple things aren't, like battery terminals there are not. Differential, that's oil. Transmission, engine oil, engine filter, that kind of stuff are on there. Engine strainer, which I don't have a strainer anymore. I just have a spin-on oil filter, which is better. But if you had a sock filter on there, then those always have the strainer can, which is a separate one. So all this stuff is clearly listed here on a chart. But again, if you look at all those, every single one of those numbers, 90% of them are grease fittings. So there's things on there like, the bell cranks that go for the linkages and the steering, the clutch and the throttle and everything like that. And then the lubrication period, this will really freak people out here that it's, 1,500 miles for most of that stuff. And then, the numbers correspond with the code on there. So, and then the back of this tells you what to use. For the most part, everything here I'm just using a multi-purpose grease for. But all of these codes stand for a different oil. It could be like sodium soap grease or, chassis lubricant, gear oil, that kind of stuff. Here's the chart. So there's a lot of stuff to do on maintenance on a bus. I would assume that this chart kind of comes as a surprise for some of you guys. If you don't own a bus, you would have never realized there's so much grease fittings on here. It's like some of them are for the steps up front and all the normal tie rods, kingpins, that kind of stuff. Slack adjusters. The leaf springs get greased everywhere, and they actually get greased where they cross the axle too. There's a fitting on there too, and then up at the shackles. It's a whole lot of work to do, and it usually takes me about an hour and a half or so to go through the whole list on them. The good thing about the silver sides is you can climb right under it. You don't have to block it up or pull it up on blocks or anything. Even big guys like me fit under, especially now with those higher tires in the back. I climbed right under there today into the slack adjusters with no help whatsoever. I do have to be careful on the one side because I have the airbags, so it's up about 3 inches over there. As long as I got 3 inches of clearance, I'm fine. I have a wood block that I throw under there. So I'm not gonna take you through every one of these while I get down there because I just need to have 2 hands on the grease gun. So, and it's not something you want to watch somebody grease tie rod ends and stuff like that. You've seen that and know how to do that. But just showing you the chart and what's involved in it and what the intervals are, that helps people know what to do. One of your best traveling companions is right there, a Vitamix. If you don't have one of those, they're pretty awesome. My wife makes all kinds of amazing food in those. Soups and everything, it's great. I finished the install of the remote for the Magnum inverter. And this is the little wall between the bathroom and the kitchen. And this is where we have a little USB dual charge port that's wired in off a 12 volt, so it's off the house battery system, so we can just plug in our phones and stuff like that if we need to. That's our water pump switch, smoke detector, and so on. But cut the hole in the wall, that's great. Now I can reach all the functions for that right on there. Part of my pre-trip is just checking out the wheels, checking the fluid level in the hubs. My tire pressure, I just make sure it doesn't look like they're bulging or anything like that. And then I have a TPMS system that tells me the exact, so I don't have to check them like that. And that tire shine, I still can't believe that. So I got all the bottom of the bus washed off. Everything's pretty much so ready to go. So tomorrow I'll do the complete pre-trip before I go, including the air brake test, where I check in, the air compressor cut in, cut out, all that stuff. There's no reason to do that today. It was working the last time I did it, and that's part of my regular pre-trip for the real trip. Today was just mostly maintenance on things, getting them, going over them for the pre-trip, looking at everything, and then servicing stuff on there too. So everything should be good to go. We got the bus mostly loaded up, a few more things to add in, and we should hit the road tomorrow morning about 9 o'clock, I think. And then we're headed to Davenport, Iowa type area, I think is our first stop.